So last night I recorded a video and did a blog post on the Corporate Transparency Act. It's been on my mind. So if you haven't heard, there is a new requirement starting January 1st, 2024, that basically all companies, especially small companies, have to register with FinCEN, which is the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, and you have to disclose who owns companies. And even if you're like 3 layers deep, you're still an indirect owner. You still have to disclose if you have 25% ownership or substantial control over an entity. And I was reading an article this morning by a retired CPA, and he was saying this is blatantly unconstitutional and it's invasion of privacy and all this kind of stuff. And that's probably true. So that's your line in the sand? I don't know. If you're a constructionist when it comes to the Constitution, then pretty much everything that the federal government does is unconstitutional. So where you pick your battles is certainly up for debate. For the people who want to hash it out in court, then have at it. That is not a battle that I think is really worth fighting, just because the upside is basically zero and the downside is enormous. You'd basically be trying to argue that the entire administrative state is unconstitutional, which it is, but you're also not going to win that fight. There's definitely a calculation to be done as far as what is worth fighting, what is not. But an example of something that is worth fighting, or was worth fighting at the time, when Trump was first elected, he signed an executive order, and part of the executive order was to undo, I'm trying to remember the language off the top of my head, but it was something to the effect of nobody will incur any economic harm from the Affordable Care Act. And what that spoke to specifically was that in those days you had the shared responsibility payment, which some states still have. California still has that. But on the federal level, this was being implemented. The shared responsibility payment was a tax. And when it went to the Supreme Court, when Obama was still in office, the fact that it was a tax was really what allowed it to be ruled as constitutional, because the Congress has the power to tax, according to the Constitution. When Trump comes in and he makes an executive order, I had this printed out on my desk at the time, and he says that you cannot suffer economic injury from the Affordable Care Act, then he basically said that we are undoing the tax. And that was an interesting conundrum, because do you fill out the form as is on your tax return, or do you side with the executive order that Trump issued? And I would have to explain this choice to clients and say, IRS says this, the president says that. They're both executive agencies. So it's a very convoluted situation, and I would help clients make their decision as to what they wanted to do if they were going to be impacted by that shared responsibility payment. I guess the point here is picking your battles is important. You have to weigh the likelihood of success and the upside and the downside and the amount of effort you have to put into that whole thing. In this particular case, I think I'm recommending to people to comply with the regulation and let the lawyers fight it out in court as to whether the whole structure is constitutional or not, and that process will take years, and it will require people to disagree and then get fined and possibly put in jail, and then arguing before the court that this whole thing is unconstitutional. So that's a long process, and in the meantime, are you going to bet on those people winning, or are you going to hedge your bets and comply along the way? So obviously everybody has to make their own decisions, but everything else in life, you got to pick your battles and pick where you want to spend your time and energy. And time and energy are limited resources, and even more than time, I think energy is limited. You can only focus on so much, and where do you want that to make the biggest impact? Now, I understand the argument that, well, if everybody did that, then it would just be a slow road to hell. And yeah, that's true. And some people will find their issue and put their time and energy into that. And as a society, we have to rely on those individuals with their individual passions and efforts and resources. We all are interdependent in that way. Anyway, that's what's on my mind today.